The city of Aquatica Prime hummed with a low, resonant thrum, a constant vibration that tickled the sensitive lateral lines of its inhabitants. This was the heart of the Xylar Dominion, a civilization spanning several galaxies, renowned for its unwavering logic and formidable military prowess. Sunlight filtered through the carefully engineered kelp forest on the city's surface, casting dappled shadows on the meticulously planned coral structures below. The Xylar themselves were a sight to behold. Sleek, bioluminescent beings with streamlined bodies perfectly adapted for aquatic life. Their movements were precise, economical, each action dictated by centuries of ingrained protocol. Conversation consisted of carefully modulated clicks and whistles, each phrase conveying layers of meaning that would take human linguists years to decipher. And then there was Bob. Bob wasn't sleek, Bob wasn't bioluminescent, Bob wasn't precise. Bob was, in the most generous terms, a lanky, slightly disheveled human male, currently residing in Aquatica Prime as, well, the Xylar weren't entirely sure. He'd arrived as part of a cultural exchange program, a concept the Xylar had agreed to mostly out of scientific curiosity and a desire to catalog new life forms. They suspected he was more of a specimen than an exchanger. He was currently residing in what the Xylar termed a habitation module, which, to be frank, looked like a giant glass hamster ball bobbing gently in a large plaza. The plaza itself was a marvel of Xylar engineering, designed for efficient pedestrian flow and optimal acoustic resonance for public announcements. Bob, however, seemed to be using it as a personal relaxation zone. The sounds of Aquatica Prime were a symphony of aquatic industry. Automated filtration systems gurgled, transport vehicles zipped through transparent tubes with a whoosh, and the rhythmic pulse of the city's central power generator resonated deep within the water. Overlaid on this were the crisp, efficient announcements from the central information hub, informing citizens of their daily schedules, nutrient-paced rations, and mandatory calisthenics routines. The air, or rather, the water, tasted faintly of processed algae and metallic salts, the base components of the Xylar's meticulously balanced diet. The scent was omnipresent, clinging to everything, a constant reminder of the Xylar's devotion to functional efficiency. Bob, however, seemed oblivious. He was currently attempting to juggle 3 brightly colored inflatable spheres, a human, activity that the Xylar found utterly baffling. His movements were clumsy, his posture slumped, and he kept dropping the spheres, which would then drift lazily through the water, disrupting the carefully orchestrated flow of pedestrian traffic. Group of Xylar officers resplendent in their iridescent armor paused to observe him. Their multifaceted eyes blinked slowly, processing the visual data with cold, calculating efficiency. They exchanged a series of rapid clicks and whistles, their tone a mixture of confusion and mild disapproval. One of the officers, a particularly stern-looking Xylar named Commander Krill, adjusted his hydro helmet and directed a modulated burst of sound towards Bob's habitation module. Human specimen, designated Bob, cease frivolous activity. Your behavior deviates from established cultural exchange parameters. Bob, mid-juggle, paused, squinted at the officers through the murky water, and gave a casual wave. Chill out, Krill. Just killin' time. He then promptly dropped all 3 spheres again. The Xylar officers exchanged another round of bewildered clicks. This was going to be a long assignment. Bob's arrival had thrown a wrench into the Xylar's perfectly synchronized society. His every action seemed designed to contradict their meticulously crafted protocols. Where they were precise, he was haphazard. Where they were efficient, he was, well, Bob. One of the first incidents involved the Nutrient Dispenser 3000, a device designed to provide Xylar citizens with their daily rations of perfectly balanced nutrient paste. The Xylar revered this machine. It represented their commitment to optimized sustenance. Bob, however, saw it as something else entirely. He approached the dispenser with a mischievous glint in his eye, fiddling with the controls in a way that made the nearby Xylar technicians shudder. He bypassed the standard nutrient paste options, somehow managing to reprogram the machine to dispense a frothy, multicolored concoction that resembled something vaguely edible. When questioned, Bob cheerfully called it Nutri-Slushy and offered it around, much to the horror of the Xylar present. Then there was the language. The Xylar language was a complex system of clicks, whistles, and bioluminescent flashes, each conveying precise information. Bob, on the other hand, seemed to be operating under the impression that it was some sort of aquatic karaoke. He peppered his conversations with bizarre, nonsensical phrases, often accompanied by exaggerated gestures. His attempts at Xylar greetings usually involved mangled pronunciations and made-up words. Instead of the formal gloompa click whistle shimmer, a respectful acknowledgement of status and intent, he'd offer a breezy, "How's it hangin', glow sticks?" The Xylar were unsure whether to be offended, confused, or deeply concerned for his mental well-being. Commander Krill found himself increasingly exasperated by Bob's antics. He had assigned a team of observers to monitor the human's every move, hoping to decipher some logic behind his chaotic behavior. The reports came back filled with entries like, "Subject attempted to communicate with filtration system," and "Subject used algae scrubbers as exercise equipment," and "Subject inquired about the possibility of adding sprinkles to nutrient paste." The high-ranking officials of the Xylar Dominion began to take notice. Whispers circulated about the human anomaly and the disruptions he was causing. Some feared that Bob was a spy, sent to destabilize their society with his bizarre customs. Others believed he was simply insane, a defective specimen unfit for interspecies interaction. During one formal address, Bob interrupted the proceedings to ask the Grand Overseer if Xylar had any holidays. This was such a disruption to the usual formalities of the Dominion that half of those present simply stopped functioning for a few minutes, swimming in confused circles. Krill was starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, this was all intentional. The Grand Overseer paused, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with what could only be described as confusion. After a moment of stunned silence, he replied, "In perfectly modulated Xylar clicks, holidays are an inefficient allocation of societal resources. We celebrate productivity cycles." Bob's response? Lame. This single word echoed through the chamber, causing a wave of discomfort to ripple through the assembled Xylar. The council recessed early that day. As Bob continued his stay, his curiosity seemed to grow exponentially. One day, during an authorized tour of a restricted area, he accidentally wandered into a high-security research facility. This facility housed the Xylar's most prized possession, the Harmonizer, a device designed to emit frequencies that could neutralize aggression in hostile alien species. In theory, it was their ultimate peacekeeping tool. In reality, it was a giant, complicated-looking machine with lots of blinking lights and intimidating nozzles. The Harmonizer was heavily guarded naturally, but Bob, with his uncanny ability to charm or confuse anyone, somehow managed to slip past the sentries. Perhaps they were too busy debating whether his offer of a high five constituted a breach of protocol. Whatever the reason, Bob found himself alone with the Harmonizer, a child in a very expensive, very dangerous candy store. He circled the machine, tapping on its various components and humming to himself. The Xylar monitoring him remotely began to panic. Commander Krill watched the security feed with growing dread. "What is he doing?" he hissed, his bioluminescence flashing red. The technicians could only offer nervous clicks and whistles in response. On screen, Bob was now fiddling with the Harmonizer's control panel, his fingers dancing across the unfamiliar buttons. Alarms began to blare, bathing the room in a pulsating crimson light. The Xylar security forces were mobilized, but it was too late. Bob had already pressed a big, inviting button labeled, in Xylar script, "Do not press." The facility went silent. The alarms stopped. The lights returned to normal. Bob stepped back, admiring his handiwork with a satisfied grin. The Xylar waited with bated breath, expecting the worst. Had he activated the Harmonizer? Was it about to unleash a wave of pacifism upon the galaxy, rendering them defenseless? Or worse, had he inadvertently turned it into some kind of weapon? Meanwhile, Bob was having a great time. He couldn't read the Xylar writing, obviously, but he figured it couldn't be that complicated. All the blinking lights looked pretty, and it had a nice hum to it. He wondered if it could play music. The Xylar response was swift and decisive. A squad of heavily armed guards stormed the facility, weapons trained on Bob. He simply raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, a goofy smile on his face. "Hey, no need to get your gills in a twist," he said. "I was just admiring the thingy." Commander Krill arrived on the scene, his face a mask of fury. "Human," he barked. "Explain yourself. What have you done to the Harmonizer?" Bob shrugged, completely unfazed by the weaponry pointed in his direction. "Relax, dude. I just, tweaked a few settings. It seemed a little off." Krill stared at him, his bioluminescence flickering erratically. "Off? Off? This is a device of immense power. You could have destroyed us all." Bob scratched his head. "Nah, I don't think so. All I did was, well, you'll see." He gestured towards the Harmonizer, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Why don't you give it a try?" Krill hesitated. Was this a trap? Was Bob about to unleash some kind of devastating attack? He decided to proceed with caution. He ordered a technician to approach the Harmonizer and run a diagnostic check. The technician, visibly trembling, approached the machine and began tapping on the control panel. After a few moments, his eyes widened in disbelief. He turned to Krill, his bioluminescence flashing with a mixture of confusion and astonishment. "Commander," he stammered. "The Harmonizer, it's been reconfigured." Krill's patience finally snapped. "Reconfigured how?" he demanded. The technician hesitated, then blurted out, It's dispensing flavored liquids." The truth, when it finally surfaced, was almost too absurd to comprehend. The Harmonizer, the Xylar's prized instrument of galactic peace, wasn't a weapon at all, not in the conventional sense anyway. It was in reality a highly sophisticated nutrient dispenser, capable of synthesizing and delivering customized flavor profiles to suit the Xylar's precise dietary needs. It was essentially a giant, extremely complicated soda fountain, designed for a species with exceptionally boring taste buds. Bob, with his insatiable curiosity and total disregard for Xylar protocol, had inadvertently stumbled upon its true function. But instead of unleashing intergalactic harmony, he'd merely reprogrammed it to create something far more human. He had, in effect, turned a peacekeeping device into a soft drink machine. The liquid that now gurgled from the Harmonizer's nozzles wasn't a weapon, nor was it a neutralizing agent. It was a fizzy, brightly colored concoction that vaguely resembled an earth beverage. It was, to be precise, something akin to soda. A primitive blend of flavored nutrients carbonated for that extra zing. The Xylar, whose diets consisted solely of standardized nutrient pastes, were utterly bewildered. They couldn't fathom why anyone would intentionally combine flavors and then introduce bubbles. It was an affront to their hyper-logical sensibilities, a culinary paradox that threatened the very foundations of their society. Commander Krill cautiously approached the machine, extending a hesitant appendage towards one of the nozzles. "What is this substance?" he inquired, his bioluminescence pulsing with a mixture of revulsion and curiosity. Bob grinned. "Try it. You might like it," he said. "I call it Xylar Fizz." Krill, against his better judgment, allowed a small amount of the liquid to dribble into his mouth. His eyes widened. His bioluminescence flickered violently. He didn't know what to make of the sensation. The sweetness, the tanginess, the bubbles. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. "It is perplexing," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. The other Xylar present exchanged nervous glances. They had never seen their commander so confused. Bob chuckled. "Perplexing is good," he said. "I've been working on the flavor profiles. This one's Kelp Kola. Next up, I'm thinking of a brine berry flavor. What do you think?" The Xylar were speechless. Bob, meanwhile, continued to tinker with the Harmonizer, adjusting the settings and adding new ingredients. He was in his element, a mad scientist in an alien laboratory, creating chaos one carbonated beverage at a time. The implications of his actions, however, were far more profound than he could possibly imagine. He had inadvertently introduced a concept utterly foreign to the Xylar, the pursuit of pleasure through taste. This revelation struck at the very core of their militaristic, hyper-logical society, a society built on efficiency and uniformity. The idea that one might actually enjoy consuming nutrients, that flavor could be a source of recreation, was revolutionary. The Xylar were a species designed for order, for structure, for the unwavering pursuit of their designated roles. They had no concept of fun, no understanding of the simple joys that humans took for granted. And now, thanks to Bob and his alien-flavored soda, their entire worldview was about to be turned upside down. The Xylar had faced down hostile alien empires, navigated treacherous asteroid fields, and maintained peace across vast swathes of the galaxy. But they were utterly unprepared for the chaos that was about to be unleashed by a human, a repurposed peacekeeping device, and a fizzy drink. Despite their initial revulsion at the concept of flavored carbonated nutrients, a seed of curiosity had been planted in the Xylar collective consciousness. Commander Krill, despite his confusion, found himself strangely drawn to the Xylar. Fizz. He cautiously took another sip, then another, his bioluminescence pulsing with increasing intensity. Soon other Xylar began to tentatively approach the Harmonizer. They observed Krill with a mixture of apprehension and fascination. The first few brave souls mimicked his actions, cautiously sampling the strange, bubbling liquid. Their reactions were varied, ranging from bewildered grimaces to subtle flickers of something resembling enjoyment. Then, something unexpected happened. A young Xylar cadet, barely out of training, took a large gulp of Kelp Kola and let out a sound that could only be described as a burp. Gas escaped his gills. The other Xylar recoiled in horror, but the cadet just giggled, a sound so alien to their species that it sent shivers down their carapaces. But it didn't stop there. Soon, a low hum of excitement began to ripple through the ranks. The Xylar, normally so stoic and disciplined, were becoming animated. They began experimenting with the different flavors Bob was creating: brine berry, algae apple, and a particularly pungent concoction he called Krillberry Blast. Before long, a full-blown addiction had taken hold. The Xylar couldn't get enough of the humans' strange fizzy drink. They began lining up at the Harmonizer, neglecting their duties, their training, even their carefully scheduled nutrient paste rations. The rigid structure of Xylar society began to crumble, one bubble at a time. The consequences were immediate and widespread. Patrol routes were left unmanned. Training exercises were skipped. Important strategic meetings were interrupted by cravings for Kelp Kola. The Xylar military, once a paragon of efficiency and discipline, descended into a state of bubbly, flavor-induced chaos. Senior officers found themselves struggling to maintain order. They issued stern warnings, threatened disciplinary action, and even attempted to confiscate the Harmonizer. But it was no use. The Xylar were hooked. They would sneak off to the Harmonizer during breaks, during meals, even during simulated war games. The normally pristine corridors of the Xylar city were now littered with discarded nutrient paste packets and the occasional spilled puddle of brightly colored Xylar fizz. The air, once filled with the hum of efficient machinery and the crisp commands of officers, now echoed with the burps and giggles of soda-addicted Xylar. The very fabric of their society was being unraveled by a human, a repurposed peacekeeping device, and a disturbingly delicious carbonated beverage. The Xylar High Council, normally a picture of serene aquatic authority, was in disarray. Holographic projections flickered with reports of mass absenteeism, plummeting productivity, and most disturbingly, a sharp decline in the consumption of standardized nutrient paste. Grand Admiral Thrax, a veteran of countless intergalactic skirmishes, rubbed his eye stalks wearily. This Xylar fizz he boomed, his voice echoing through the chamber, is threatening the very foundations of our society. Council member Zill, a renowned strategist, countered, but is it truly a threat, Admiral? Or merely a change? He gestured to a holographic display showing Xylar soldiers sharing a brine berry fizz during what was supposed to be a rigorous training exercise. Their loyalty to the collective has not wavered. They simply also desire this beverage. The debate raged on. Some council members argued for immediate suppression, citing the importance of order and discipline. Others, like Zill, suggested a more nuanced approach, recognizing the potential for cultural evolution. They realized that destroying the Harmonizer, or punishing those who enjoyed its creations, would only breed resentment. True loyalty, they began to understand, couldn't be enforced through rigid obedience. After cycles of deliberation, a surprising consensus emerged. The council decreed that the Xylar fizz would not be banned. Instead, it would be integrated into their culture, albeit with regulations. Consumption would be limited during duty hours, and standardized flavors would be developed to ensure nutritional balance. The decision was met with a mix of relief and jubilation throughout the Xylar city. Soldiers celebrated with a controlled but enthusiastic gulp of Kelp Kola. The rigid structure of Xylar society remained intact, but with a newfound appreciation for individual pleasure and a subtle undercurrent of bubbly rebellion. Meanwhile, Bob, oblivious to the political firestorm he had ignited, was tinkering with the Harmonizer, trying to perfect a new flavor: space root beer. He looked up as Commander Krill approached, a hint of a smile playing on his gills. "So," Bob asked, with a shrug, "any requests? I was thinking maybe a nice seaweed smoothie, or perhaps Krillberry Blast Extreme." And so, Xylar Fizz became a staple, a bizarre but beloved addition to Xylar life. New traditions sprung up, like Fizz Fridays, where Xylar could sample experimental flavors after a long week of strategic planning. The Great Hall of Tactics even had a Fizz bar installed, right next to the War Games console. Bob, meanwhile, became an accidental icon. Murals depicting him holding a bubbling glass appeared on public buildings, often alongside images of revered military leaders. Historians debated whether he was a cultural revolutionary, a culinary genius, or just a really lucky human. The truth, of course, was much simpler. Bob was just being Bob, a guy who liked fizzy drinks and wasn't afraid to share. And in the end, he taught a militaristic, hyper-logical species that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't a planet-destroying cannon, but a refreshing beverage and a laid-back attitude. As the galactic sun set on the Xylar city, casting long shadows across the fizz-fueled celebrations, one thing was clear: loyalty, like a good soda, is best served with a little bit of fizz. Or, as Bob put it, hey, if it ain't bubbly, it ain't worth it. And with that, he opened another can of space root beer, the sound echoing through the newly liberated halls of Xylar society.